What's up, gamers? Dreamcastguy here, and this is my brutally honest review for Aliens Fireteam Elite. In space, no one can hear you scream. This iconic line began the original Alien movie back in 1979, but over the course of the decades, the Alien idea has definitely warped and changed a lot, from multiple films to crazy comics where Batman actually fist fights aliens, or even stuff like a couple good video games. But I think a lot of us have been curious what the limits of Aliens can be. Like, this series, as good as it's been, and as bad as it's been at parts, I think a lot of us have been curious how they can make this a better video game. Because let's face it, from the very start, these have practically been video game movies. It's just a great chance for a couple buddies to fight off a bunch of very spooky, gigantic aliens in the depths of space. Well, I think this might be the very best Alien game I've ever had a chance to play, but mostly because of the friends you get a chance to play it with. Fireteam Elite is a co-op shooter where you and 2 other friends play through 12 separate missions and a horde mode. But this game is actually very, very rigid in how it plays out, and that's sort of why I enjoy it. Throughout the course of this game, there are these different missions that take you into the depths of some very derelict spaceships, but here is the key difference. In a lot of games, I feel like you're struggling to survive. You're fighting to try and win the war. Well, the war is already lost. This takes place in a part of the universe where the xenomorphs have already won. There are thousands and thousands of them that have wiped out colonies, planets, and of course, tons of these space vessels just floating along. So at this point, our team is not trying to just defeat anything. Your goal is simply to try and rescue anybody that's left breathing. But this is part of what's fun about it. These are a series of quests, essentially, that take you into some of the most messed up and completely flooded, destroyed areas to try and hopefully get out one last saving soul. Now here's the thing, Alien Fireteam Elite is a co-op shooter, but what makes it work so well is that the controls are incredibly crisp. If you really go down to its heart and soul, the reason this game just definitely works so well is that it is just such a tight, mechanically good shooter that happens to have tons of fun stuff to shoot at. Let's begin by talking a bit about these different missions. The story and writing itself is just incredibly bad. I mean, it's so paper thin. It's pretty much just an excuse to go into these crazy situations and blast your way out. But the reason they are just so fun is because of how great it feels to pull the freaking trigger. Now, I did mention this already, but there's only 12 missions in this game. There's basically 4 main quests with 3 sub-quests involved in it, which essentially takes you to the different environments of the game itself. But I do want to make this a gigantic note. This is the most important thing of the entire video. Alright, are you paying attention? These levels are not randomized. Now, what I mean by that is that this gameplay may appear to be very fluid in the style of Left 4 Dead, but this is pretty static. Now, what that means is that everything is pretty much the exact same every time you play it. There are some small differences, like sometimes I'd find landmines in a hallway that typically was empty, or there'd be like one extra enemy that pops out of a vent, but pretty much every single mission plays out identically every time you beat it. In fact, even the voice actors say the same lines. Like, oh my god, there's a spitter on that pillar that we have to shoot. Like, this game definitely plays the same every time you go through it. But even still, it takes 10 hours just to finish the main quest. So to me, this feels totally worth it. Like, straight up, if you're just looking for a game to play with your friends, even without all the randomization or the replayability, a single playthrough of this was so freaking fun. I think a lot of people are going to have a blast doing just that. Now, I did play through the entire game twice, and the horde mode, which we're going to talk about in a second, but part of the reason this game just keeps pushing you to go into it is that it feels so great to level up. So there's this system in the game that's called Loadouts, which feels like a bit of a weird name for it, because this is a very actually in-depth way to handle character creation and itemization. But the way it kind of works is that first off, you choose a class. Now there's like 5 different classes you can play as gunners, medics, heavy weapons experts, recon analysis people, and what you gotta know is that these guys play pretty different. Now everybody of course uses guns, everybody's able to shoot and loot and go crazy crazy and stuff, but what's different is a lot of the weapons they use, like the Heavy is able to use gigantic machine guns that my gunner couldn't, but it additionally makes it where you have very, very different special abilities. One of my good friends, Evan, decided to play as the medic that let him not only heal other players, but he could drop this like little special aura puddle on the ground where anybody who stood in it could get an area of effect heal. It was incredibly effective, especially during the gigantic firefights. Each of these skills has a different balance to them that is incredibly vital to figure out as fast as possible, because a lot of these missions start off very slow at the start. You know, here's a couple monsters that are popping out to try and just rip you to shreds, but each of the missions ends with a gigantic choke point, typically a finale style event where you're having to defend a generator or blow something up, or, you know, kind of do something that's going to make a lot of noise and essentially fight waves and waves of enemies. So the better you understand your different abilities and the better you can play together, the more you're going to survive. Like my guy, I thought the gunner was so freaking cool. The way my character worked is that I have this gigantic meter on the screen itself, and that's the more I hit my targets, the more accurate my bullets are, it charges up, making it so I deal extra damage. But here's the real fun part of Loadouts. There is a heavy amount of customization as to how this actually works. While you're playing this, each of the missions that you complete, you get experience points that make you level up. Now the way this works is that it unlocks this like basically microchip style powered upgrade board. Now as you're playing through this, you keep unlocking additional abilities that let you can change it so my grenades are instead fire grenades, or I can make it where every time I hit a target it takes additional damage from all people, or just sometimes things where my special ability cooldown is reduced the more kills I get. Now this is not only just fun to do, but it's actually an incredibly vital part of the gameplay loop, because this game gets incredibly tough. The aliens keep getting stronger. The deeper you go into these missions, you start fighting some crazy special things, like aliens that are shooting acid from all the way across the room, so you need some long-range weapons to try and take them out. There's armored drones that will actually hit and run. They'll drop out of vents, knock you over, do a bunch of damage, and then jump back into a hole, and you just have to wait for them to strike again. Really, the only time you can hurt them is when they're hurting you. There's also huge things like the Praetorian, which is this like 12-foot tall, 2-ton truck that wants to run you over. Each of these different guys are very, very strong, very, very armored, and just especially built to mess you up. So the smarter you play with yourself and of course your teammates, the better you're going to do, being able to do things like calling out what you need to heal, or just telling my heavy weapons expert Nick here, he kept using a rocket launcher to level these dudes, and it made it where we definitely did better because of it. Now this class customization does not just affect the abilities, but it also works with the guns themselves. You can go in and put different attachments. You can go to a store to buy better clips, better scopes, better things to make it so your gun fits your playstyle. Now the guns also level up. The same way that you get stronger, the weapons themselves also just get extra passive perks that make it where each of these things is incredibly good and incredibly satisfying as you level up. Now I want to talk a bit about the bads here for a second. The biggest downside of this game is that at times it feels a bit repetitive in tone. These environments, as you're going through them, they start to feel like Legos. Now what I mean is that after a few hours, it had these elements of it that just kept getting repeated. Like a lot of these textures and sections of the map just feel frequently reused. Like if you see a really, really nice looking set of stairs and you're like, wow, this is really high quality design. Well, you're probably going to run down those exact same set of stairs 50 times over. Or you see a huge gooey awesome section of the hive and you think, this is super great. Well, guess what? You're going to be seeing that over and over and over again. But this doesn't feel like the biggest drawback. It's just that at times it feels really weird to just see these sections practically being looped. It feels like most of these maps were intended to be shorter and they kind of stretched them out. Now part of this is because if you do choose to replay this game, there is 5 different difficulty options, and clearly this is what the developers want you to do. So during the course of the main game, just beating it normally, I leveled up quite a bit. I certainly found a lot of rare and very powerful pieces of gear and stuff, and so because of it, I ended up having a character that was like level 500 of combat ability rating. So I was able to go back and play these harder difficulties with my friends on the second playthrough. but these difficulty options are more in-depth than just taking more damage. The aliens become harder to kill, but they also just shred you faster, they hold you down longer. If they grab you, it makes it where their acid is actually more effective, but there's also some subtle differences that make these harder difficulties way more hard. Like, one of them is the fact that typically, you've probably noticed this, but when I'm aiming down the sights, each of the aliens has this yellow outline around them, making it so that even in pitch black, you can actually see and aim and target people very, very effectively. Well, this is removed on the harder difficulties. You're actually just kind of aiming in the dark and hoping for the best. They also add in team damage, but only on the higher difficulties, making it so you have to very much pay attention to every single bullet, and sometimes during those chaotic times where you want to just pull the pin on a grenade and whip it to freedom, well, you still have to be careful about where it's going to end up. As nice as it was to go through this game a second time and actually experience all these different environments with more challenges put on top, I feel like it's still not enough to really affect the replayability. I feel like after finishing this game once, I had all the fun I was going to get. Now, to try and make some extra elements of fun and adventure, there is this thing called the challenge card system, where you can choose to put on extra difficulty options that can be very, very random, like your guns will jam just randomly, or something like you can make it where the camera's kind of messed up. You can make it where the freaking radar is actually deactivated. Now, choosing to use these challenge cards gives you extra money, extra experience points, or sometimes just extra enjoyment. But I still think that part of this game, it just comes down to the fact that once you've done the 12 missions, you're kind of complete. If you do manage to finish this main campaign, you unlock an additional horde mode, which is just kind of waves and waves and waves of alien trying to take you out. But I guess my thought is that it really kind of wears thin. As much fun as this game was, and as much as I enjoyed my runs through playing with my buddies and stuff, it's one of those games that once I put it down, I'm definitely never going back. There is apparently going to be a bunch of additional content coming down the line, like extra classes, extra weapons, extra cosmetics, outfits, and stuff like that, but I'm probably not going back. Did I enjoy this game? Yeah, it's pretty good, but as an Alien fan, it didn't really quite scratch that itch as much as I probably hoped. It seemed like this needed just a tiny bit more budget to make this go from a little bit of polish to a lot of polish, to make it where fans have that extra bit of depth for this world that we all love so much. Okay, so we've heard some good and some bad, but let's go over the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving Aliens Fireteam Elite an 8 out of 10. This is a game that, in my opinion, definitely is a lot better with friends. It's probably possible to play this with randos on the internet, but I feel like this is one of those things where having some buddies to back you up, hearing your friend's personal scream when he's yelling into the mic because he's getting held down by a drone, this is a better time with your friends to back you up. So if you can, do not play this with bots. Experience this the proper way with some other people there to screw you over or help you out as needed. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, because it does help out, and if you could, please do me the biggest favor of all, and keep dreaming. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.